Today I would like to tell you about the prophecies of a couple of modern Bulgarian prophets. And although they are local for this small country, I believe that they will be of value for the international audience as well, because in the near future, in the scope of the next few decades, the Bulgarian nation will be no longer as it is now separated. It will be just one of the tribes, one of the nations of the big Slavic Union, which has been mentioned not only by the prophets I'm going to review today, but also by many of international sources, international and older prophets. And that is important because the nations of this union will be the gardeners of the sprouts of the new age after the big destruction. And I'm using the term Slavic just for the lack of any better. Actually, it's not something necessarily related geographically now to Eastern Europe, because the souls with the Slavic aura, they are actually dispersed all over the world. But some of them have not severed the connection with the spirits of the lands from where their far-off ancestors came. Or in other cases, people may not have any blood connection to this line. However, because they or their ancestors have adopted the culture of the survivors, which is actually more proper term than Slavic for those who have watched my Survivors series. So souls who have remained loyal to the ancient noble qualities of the survivors but have been born in other races, they may also become gardeners. So for the rest of this video I will use the term the people of Christ to indicate what is mostly called Slavic people nowadays. I can't use the proper ancient term, Arya, because then the people will think I will mean something completely different, as the meaning of the term has been twisted like 180 degrees. The ancient people meant something completely different when they said Arya. But that was the proper ancient term, along with Rusi, Rusui, and Volgars, as coming from the banks of the river Volga. And although by far the most famous contemporary Bulgarian prophet is Baba Vanga, she's world famous actually, it is her teacher, Преподобната Стойна, who seems to be, from what we know currently, the highest level guardian spirit who has incarnated in Bulgaria in human body recently. Also, she specified that I came to prepare the people for the new earth, for the new beautiful world which will flourish, she said, some 150 to 200 years from now, a time when everybody will have these special mystic abilities to see the past and the future. And she was a very high-level mystic. She was seen levitating. She cured miraculously countless people. So she proved in practice that she was not an ordinary person. It wasn't just sweet talking like some modern gurus. So she was in a very remote village area. We don't even have a single photograph of her. However, we have something way more precious. Few days before she died, she said to one of the people who were helping her, because she was completely blind since childhood, she said that in this village there is this young girl, and she's got a notebook and a pen, and she knows how to write. Call her. I want to dictate something to her, because in just a couple of days I will become very sick and then I will depart. And luckily, whatever she dictated in that time has been published as the first 100 pages of this book. And that, I think, is absolutely precious, priceless on the level of the set material, because it's directly out of this world. She lost her eyesight when she was very young, and her parents. So at that time she started seeing everything, the astral world, the past, the future. And it was Saint George actually who brought her up. He regularly talked to her in her visions and educated her even with the definitions of simple things from this world, because she didn't have any parents or anybody else to explain what's going on outside in the world. And although she's said to be Christian, I see it more as a camouflage. The church accepted her. Even ordinary priests from the area and high level bishops, or whatever they are called in the church hierarchy, they visited her, they saw her miracles, they accepted her. And mainly, I guess, it was that she was healing all the time, every single day. People in terrible sicknesses would come and she would miraculously cure them, and of course they would reward with money, and they would bring sacks with food. All that 100%, all of that the church took every evening without any feeling of obligation to give something back to her. But anyhow, she did not read this Bible of the church of that time. She read directly the Bible of the Bogomils. Now, the Bogomils were really the people of Christ. They learned directly from his followers. They really lived in the way he said. And even though the mainstream history is trying in every way to diminish their importance and make different names for them, as they made branches in the different countries, so that it will seem like something not the same thing. Actually, they had a lot of coverage in Europe and Asia. I don't think they were the only group which followed Christ, because at that time it was not so organized. Other groups, like for example what is now supposed to be a Muslim sect, the Druze, they were also from the people of Christ, but they camouflaged themselves as Muslims to escape prosecution. And until today, the Druze, they keep silent and secretive. They teach their true teachings only to the initiated. So these are mainstream maps, and even after trying to minimize and diminish their influence, still you can see that they covered a lot. But then eventually, as Kali Yuga advanced, the heretics, those who deviated from the teachings of Christ, that means the modern church, eventually they managed to kill all the Bogomils. They had special crusades, and at that time the Pope came up with this genius advice when they asked him, when we go in villages where there are Bogomils, how are we going to distinguish between the church people, our people, and the Bogomils? So the Pope had this genius idea: kill them all and God will sort them out in heaven. A logo which has become nowadays the motto of murderers' gangs. So in her previous incarnation, the Prepodobna Dostoyna, she was one of the Bogomils, and at that time she underwent this education to become the perfect. The way the Bogomils were structured, they lived in communes, they did not have money or taxes. They worked together in the fields, they shared everything, they lived in happy families, the way Christ taught them. But also they had high-level occult knowledge, which Prepodobna Dostoyna remembered from those times, because at that time she underwent that education. What was that education like? Well, exactly what nowadays we call to become a shaman. It included knowledge of the herbs and crystals, but mostly knowledge of how to, at will, get out of one's body and travel and see what is going on the astral plane. And that's how the Bogomils actually survived. And they were in the forest, and when the church people or the kings who were hostile to them would come to get them, some of their, well, we call them actually shamans, the perfect ones, they would come to the village when they see with their internal vision that the gangs are coming, and they would alert the people, and when they come, the gangs, they would find nobody. But eventually, although the perfect amongst the Bogomils saw that as well, they were murdered, all of them. The perfect ones were mostly burned at the stake, and they actually accepted that fate because, from their point of view, that was their way. Uh, that was the way God prepared for them. And much to my pleasant surprise, because this book contains the true words of a true Bogomil, a lady who lived like in two lives. I was so happy to find here and there few small hints that actually the history which I present in the Survivors of Atlantis is the true one, including the fabricated 1000 years. There were some clues for that. It wasn't said directly, but for example, the time of the Bogomils, it was some around 700 years ago. And recently, this man from Eastern Europe, whose vision I published, he didn't know that, but he himself told me that his Bogomil source also told him that he lived somewhere around 700 years ago. And the spirit with which who is in touch with him, when he was in human body, he lived to the age of 180 years. And this spirit also once he showed him the Bogomil villages, which were very beautiful, natural, and also he noticed that they had some sort of towers, high towers, although he did not this East European man, he did not see details of how and why are they exactly made, but I guess that is related to all these towers around the world, especially those in Tibet. There is material on them in the Survivors of Atlantis. And the very name of the entire documentary, The Survivors of Atlantis, that was based actually on a Russian legend that all these spirits of the nature people, the people of Christ, including the true Bogomils, they're actually still there, and they're awaiting this moment of the shifting of the ages to become active again. Some of them have remained in the form of mummies. That's also in the Survivors of Atlantis. Some mummies are there that are still semi-alive, even according to so-called scientific tests. So some of these true people of Christ, they are in semi-alive mummies. Others are in this statue, like these stones, also found in Eastern Europe, or in natural objects, or even hills, boulders. In other words, they have some ties remaining with their mummies or with some natural objects, and they're using that as anchors so that they have some access to this reality, and they will participate in the events when needed. And the people of Christ, the nature people, they used to some extent also the symbol of the cross. However, it was a symmetric cross. This is an information from the East European seer. And that early cross was nothing else but just another version of the swastika. I have an older video about the swastika symbol. And since the swastika actually depicts harmony, that's why the cross was symmetric. And when the heretics came, the church, they made this asymmetric cross the main symbol, and even adding a bloody scene to it, although the essence of the message of Christ was love and enjoyment. Plus, he himself, it seems, did not get crucified personally, it was somebody else, but the rumor went that it was him. And really, the asymmetric cross is a perfect symbol for them, because the teachings of the church, yes, they very much resemble the teachings of Christ. That's why it is a cross, almost symmetric, but just a little bit distorted, but still distorted enough to make people miserable, and thus invite the devil in their minds. So part of the dictation written down in this book is a conversation between the Prepodobnata Stoina and the guardians of the Bulgarian nation, the Bulgarian tribe. And these guardians, they were also present on this earth in human form once upon a time, and they were no other but the rulers and kings who were favorable to the Bogomils. They were assassinated by the church at the time when they started claiming copyright on Christ and advertising their brand, cleverly called Christianity. But even after their earthly avatars perished, they did not abandon Bulgaria. They kept an eye on it during the dark times. And then, when the faint light of the dawn of the new age appeared on the horizon, they sent the avatar of Stoina to start preparing the people for the new times. When they first told her that waking up the nation will be the mission of her life, she said, "But I don't know how to do it. I've got no resources, plus I am completely blind." They replied that we know about this situation, that's why we have made the arrangements already. From now on, they will start inviting you to speak to the people in different villages, and they will send always 2 men and 3 horses. And sure enough, after this conversation, it really started happening because she was already known as a saint who shows miracles. So from then on, the mayors or the priests of different villages, they started getting all of a sudden this idea: why don't we invite the saint to talk to the people and lift their minds? And it was always like this: 2 men would come with 3 horses and would accompany her, one riding before her and one after her. And when she went to the villages, she spoke very basic truths to them because at that time the people were really, really very simple. And she was precisely what Seth calls in the books of Jane Roberts a speaker, a soul which has come specifically to speak the truth to the people. And although she was camouflaged as Christian and she lived in a Christian church devoted to Saint George, and by the way, that church, the building, was initially erected by the Bogomils centuries ago, the same Bogomils to which she belonged in her previous incarnation. And when she went to the villages, she did not speak the philosophy of the church, but the philosophy of the early Bogomils. And this happens to be exactly the philosophy of Sanatana Dharma and the philosophy as it is described in the set books of Jane Roberts. Absolutely no difference at all. Nowhere in the book she uses the term reincarnation. Probably she didn't even know the word. I'm sure the villagers in that region didn't have any clue what that is anyway. But the way she explains it as coming back again and again, it is absolutely the same phenomenon. And in this manner, traveling on a horse and visiting various villages, she practically continued what she was doing as a Bogomil centuries ago. At that time, she did that, was it a decade or more? And then she burned at the stake in Constantinople. Nowadays, they call it Istanbul. So, for those who are interested in how exactly a soul decides to venture in a certain realm, and then it usually takes a few avatars, few incarnations just to adjust itself to the local conditions and kind of learn how does it work over there, and then how its mission or intentions, together with skills, talents, and even sometimes knowledge of languages, is all interconnected, one life with another. That is all very well described in the books of Jane Roberts. And even going deeper in terms of, races of souls, because it also matters from where does the soul come to experience earthly life. Also, in the Vedic literature, there are countless practical stories with such lines of incarnations of a given soul as an example of how it works after all. In the books of Jane Roberts, You can find the description in proper English, and then in the stories of the Vedic literature, you can find the examples. I'm sure the theory is also explained in the Vedas, but is mostly lost in the translation, because like for types of souls, words like jati are used. And jati, as almost all other words in Sanskrit, it has got so many meanings. Mostly now it is used in terms of caste, in which caste one is born. So there can be a lot of confusion due to the multiple meanings of the same word. So this type of layers of history people will dive into when they look into their very own self in some 50 to 100 years from now, and the current modern fashion to attribute all the aspects in all one's qualities to childhood traumas and the various aspects of one's upbringing, that will not be very popular. It is just too fragmented. As people come to their senses, gradually they will understand that this approach has been overrated. The guardians of the nation also told to Prepodobnata Stoina that there will be a couple of others who will come after her and help her to prepare the people for the new age. One of them would be the world famous Baba Vanga, which is mentioned in the book of the Prepodobnata Stoina by name, Vangelia. That's Baba Vanga's name as it is written in the passport. Prepodobnata Stoina did also leave some prophecies about the end times, some of which have already happened, namely that the villages will become empty, the people will leave, nobody will be there to cultivate the land. This has already happened since the EU democracy stepped in. And in a couple of decades of democracy, they even managed to chase the people away. A couple of million of Bulgarians had to leave the country. It became impossible to live in such conditions. Many villages turned into ghost villages. Others, which previously had 1 or 2,000 inhabitants, will now have 50 or 120 inhabitants, all of them over 80 years old. And in many other Slavic countries, they had, under different pretexts, such programs for literally depopulating the regions, chasing the people away, killing them, and mainly by discouraging in every possible way the young people from having children. Regions which were very abundant with well-organized agriculture some 30 years ago were literally trashed. Now they're trying to say that, oh, the economy took such a twist by itself, of course. No, it wasn't by itself. It was all planned. Because the fat parasites on the top, they read the prophecies and they know that their end will come from those regions. Life in the country will become so miserable, the prophecies continue, that people will start hating each other and eventually even fighting and killing each other. During those times, she continued, God will send some of his best people abroad just to guard them from the madness. But eventually, after a turbulent transition, she says, they will return to their land. And if you remember the Austrian prophecies, I believe it was over there, it was also mentioned that after the Antichrist fiasco is over, the people who have been displaced by the multiculti fashion and other policies, they will return to their lands, because every land will be then like paradise, and they will continue to worship their ancestors. Because that's how Lord designed this world, and that's how it will function smoothly and beautifully when each tribe lives on the land given to it by the Lord. an Italian sculptor, sold an invisible sculpture for 15,000 euro. There was a buyer as well. All he got was the receipt of the purchase for his money. If that type of people are walking the earth, I wonder if somebody will want to buy my real paintings. I haven't really been in a position to paint for more than a year, but I still have a few pieces left and many unfinished. You can find the link to what I'm selling in the description of the video. And I hope you enjoyed the improved quality in this video, as I managed to repair, at least for now, my computer. And another helper mentioned to the Prepodobna Dostojna was most likely Petar Danov. His angelic name of his angelic form is Baines Dunu. Officially, they classified his teachings as esoteric Christianity, but actually, most likely it is Christianity straightforward from the source, because he speaks about Kali Yuga, also about reincarnation, all the truths which the church is trying to hide from the people. So I'm not really sure the term Christianity is exactly appropriate for what he taught, and he influenced many thousands of people. His lectures are translated to English. I will leave links in the description. And mostly they are explanations of the Bible, because at that time when he came in Bulgaria, the people, they were fascinated by the Bible, so he had to explain its true meaning. It is believed as well, and recorded, he lived relatively recently, that he also did have special mystical abilities and did do a couple of miracles as well. In terms of prophecies, he definitely confirmed that our generation will be the one that will live through the revelation described in the Bible. He did confirm that it will be the race of the survivors, the nature people, the people of Christ, who will be the leading force in the transition. And it will be the people from those ancient lands around the Black Sea in the middle of Eurasia who will become the seed of the new race of people and the new teachings. And it will be quite different from now. For example, he said, everybody in those times will remember their previous lives. Back then, he also described the European Union quite well, and everything that is happening now. He said the Bulgarians don't need to go on holiday to the Aegean Sea, because one day that sea will come to them. The modern Ellada, that's the old name of Greece, will sink, and the ancient one will rise. And in general, he also said that entire continents will be sinking, although he did not mention which ones exactly. And in terms of more articulate, more precise prophecies, in terms of events and years, it seems that what he saw was the timeline of the Third World War happening somewhere before year 2000, and then kind of small pre-golden age of a relative pious life, and then the Antichrist coming at the point of time at which we are now. And when I was browsing the last year the countless Christian prophecies, many other independent seers saw that timeline as well, and kind of a smaller fraction saw the timeline in which we are now. That means the Third World War coming together with the Antichrist. And my overall impression is that most likely the war in Kosovo, which happened exactly in the Balkans, where the Third World War was supposed to be ignited exactly in those years, that was an attempt to put us into that timeline. But as Mother Shipton prophesied, because she saw our timeline, the path which we took, they will not manage to split the world into. There will be one failed attempt to organize a world war. So most likely they failed with Kosovo, but now we are in the process again of trying. They are trying to ignite it again, and this time they will succeed within this decade. And it was the Austrian prophet who mentioned these two branching possibilities. In terms of the possibility of the major destruction by asteroid, as predicted by Nina and Mother Shipton, it is also there, it seems, in the Prepodobnata Stoina prophecies. Ljubomir Lucev was one of the followers of Peter Danov, and he also had mystic abilities himself. He actually served as a mystic for the government, and he was also convinced that the new golden age will be coming very, very soon. And finally, the most famous of all contemporary Bulgarian mystics, Baba Vanga. Although the way she lived was really a perfect example of how a saint spends a lifetime on earth, the church forgot to canonize her, but the people, they did not. She was also completely blind since early age, and she herself admitted that Prepodobnata Stoina was her teacher, that she was levels above her, and she would regularly go to Stoina's hermitage to recharge herself. She would spend a few days per month in the hermitage, actually sleeping in the bed of Prepodobnata Stoina. And the way she was preparing the people for the Golden Age was talking to them in person. During her long life, she met hundreds of thousands of people who flocked at any time by thousands around her house with all kinds of unsolvable problems. If I have to compare Vanga with something, she was like a giant pillar of divine justice amongst the small people. For example, she was spending every day of her life basically talking to people, accepting all the visitors, and sometimes she would go out of the gate of her very ordinary house where hundreds or even thousands of people would be waiting, some of them camping in tents for a month or more to see her. So just as an example, as she would see all these people, she would see the entire history of the soul of each and every one of them, and sometimes she would say, you and you, George, from this and this village, and that would be probably a person far away in the crowd, you should not wait to see me, you should go away. You did this and that crime, and she would narrate about their dark side in front of everybody, and then she would say, now what? Why have you come to see me after committing all these hideous things? And yet for others who were also wrongdoers but have some sort of repentance at least, for them she would offer help. Of course, there are countless other individuals who will speak and lecture on morals using a language far more refined and better structured than Vanga. However, the people will stubbornly stick to their sinful ways even after listening to such refined preachers. But with Vanga, it was different because she would tell even to absolutely unknown people in great detail how did they attract the given misery to their life, and that would make it pretty obvious that she sees everything, because often there is simply no way that she could have learned that much detail about a completely unknown person, and then that person would really realize, okay, it is really so. God does see everything and nothing is by chance. Something very simple. So basically, she taught the real law of karma to the people because many simply don't care about that law, or others that understand it don't really believe in it, Or even if they believe, they find no strength to get out of their sinful lifestyle just because everybody around is like that, drowning in hatred towards others and one's own self. So that was her main mission, to make the people understand why it is all happening to them. And although many times she said that the new age, the golden age, and the turbulent transit to it, which she said will be dreadful, although she said that is coming very, very soon, she was not urging the people to become preppers. Just on the contrary, she was saying, do you think that simple skills like those of the preppers would save you from the all-devouring flames of the change of the yugas? Of course not. Only somebody with pure heart will be able to survive the cosmic storm of the changing times. She did mention various apocalyptic visions, like, for example, all the water completely withdrawing from Earth, even in the rivers and the oceans. But she did not give any specific time for it. In the English and foreign materials about Vanga, this is what they usually translate. Sadly, this is not what she predicted. This was written by a journalist while she was still alive. But the researchers, the Bulgarian researchers who have devoted years in collecting everything she said to the hundreds of thousands of people she met, they all know very well that this is not what she said. People like to translate this material, and by the way, over the years I see that they also adjust it as the events happen. So they like to publish this because it's all neatly outlined exactly the way we want them. Everything is fixed with aliens and so on. But no, this is not what she said. She never gave a complete timeline of the future, but whatever small clues she gave about the Slavic Union, about the bright future of the Bulgarian nation, that it will survive the storm relatively well, at least compared to other nations. And in global perspective, everything that I've been mentioning in previous episodes, that's what she hinted. And even some 25 years ago, she was recorded shortly before she died, and she said, what more can I tell you? What else do you want to hear? The new age of truth and light is very, very near. It is coming already very, very soon. The people will dig out again the golden cities and understand their real history. There will be so many miracles. And the important thing is that mystics like Vanga and her teacher, Prepodobna Testoina, the way they teach karma is exactly the way karma is explained in the books of Jane Roberts and in the Vedic literature, and not the modern concept that, oh yeah, karma is there, but you just imagine and be positive and you change everything. And if you try to talk on a deeper level with such people and explain that, okay, but I have tried to be positive and erase everything for a long time and I really invested in endeavor, but nothing changed at all, then they are already programmed with the standard answer, oh no, you have to wait longer. How much? Thousands of years? And also your wish was not strong enough, they will say, to make you feel guilty. Although 10 minutes prior to that, they were convincing you not to pay attention to the karma because it will make you depressed when you know that you cannot change anything. It will take away your power. Actually, the people who talk in such a way, they're taking away your power by telling you that, you see, your wish didn't work. How do they know that you didn't wish strong enough? Do they have the powers of Vanga to see what you have done and how sincere you were? No. And the devils have already introduced these pre-programmed answers for everything. For example, recently I talked to somebody who was disrespectful to the prophecies. And I asked, why? Don't the prophets mean anything to you, the people with the special powers? And he said, yes, I do believe them, but you see, the prophecies were given for the blind people who do not see themselves. So is the person who told me this pre-programmed answer a higher level mystic than the prophets I mentioned in this series? No, he doesn't believe that. he doesn't make such claims. Or maybe his guru, who probably programmed him in such a way. No. And another clever example of a satanic pre-programmed answer. I was talking to a lady who was aware of all the evils of the fix, and still she was going for it. And, well, how and why? I asked if you understand what's going on. Well, I'm not gonna think or talk before it happens, because then I'm not living in the present moment, you know? You're not very spiritual if you're thinking so much ahead, she said. But then 5 minutes before that, she was telling me how she sold her house in the countryside to move to the city where one can have a better maintained life in a compact space. So she didn't find it unspiritual to think long term and to plan things long term when it was about the house, but when it comes to even actually more important stuff, your soul, then one is not allowed to do long-term thinking under the pretext of being spiritual. And back to the actual important topic about the real law of karma, the Prepodobna Dostojna gives very nice examples in her autobiography. For example, there was a bloody war and a terrible massacre in the region where she lived. And at that time she prayed and called her guardian saints and begged them to stop all that just because it's terrible. But they replied to her, what can we do when that is the wish of these people themselves? And she tried to argue with the guardians of the nation how it can be their own wish. And then they showed her in a vision how these very same people who were cruelly massacred at that time, they were taking a vow just a couple of weeks or day before that either we are gonna kill these people or we are gonna die ourselves. That's what they shout with their own mouths. And vows are very important. So these men, at that moment when they were making the vow with their loud voices, they were cursing their own selves to die in such terrible way very, very soon. And then the saints explained to her that even actually the Lord very, very rarely will intervene with the path of the souls. He actually leaves it upon their own wish and their own vows and intentions. And the power of such solemn vows is that they do come true. Sometimes it may take time, but they do. And it's not that when you see what you have actually desired, you may cancel it now with another desire. It doesn't work. The saint also provides lots of examples of ancestral karma. We don't understand that well and often assume mistakenly that it won't affect us since we don't understand it. And in her book, everything matches with the ancient karma philosophy. She also says that most of the things that come upon us, by far most of them are fruits of our actions from previous lives, and only a small fraction is a direct result of what we have thought or made in this very lifetime. And then another amazingly correct seer from Bulgaria, Slava Sivrukova, which I quoted in so many previous episodes. She also spoke about the Slavic Union, that Bulgaria will be relatively less affected by the upcoming changes. There will be no parts really sinking or missing. She also explained that the Bulgarians will go somewhat differently through the changes. It will affect them sooner, so that they get purified somewhat before the other people, because those who survive will be needed to help the others in rebuilding the future race. And she was mentioned in the very beginning of the series. It has been 1 year since I started this. And it was in the first episodes that I gave some timing, like the worst starting somewhere around 2025. And with the prophecies which I kept finding subsequently during this entire year, I can only say that they only confirmed this initial estimate. Here you can see they are quite busy and they've got a lot of work to do. Interestingly enough, speaking about Bulgaria, over there sadly I noticed that largely a very big percentage of the population believes the TV about the bug and everything else, and yet their fixation rate is very, very low. And why is that so? Well, I guess they were allotted and given for free plenty of international funds to be sure that they can buy all the fix they need and fix all the people as soon as possible. But over there, just the entire central infrastructure of everything consists of the most shameless thieves you can imagine. And they mostly stole all the money for the fix, and now even those who want to get it can't get it. And now let me return a little bit to the episode of the massacre narrated in this book. When the guardians of the nation showed to the Prepodobna Dostojna how the men were taking a vow to either kill the men of the neighboring country or die themselves, then she tried to argue with the guardians that actually they vowed because the king came up with this idea to avenge a war. She said, please don't hold them responsible. They were misled by the passion of this king. But they replied to her that no king has the power to give an order or legislate anything at all if the souls of the subject are not tuned to that idea already. Otherwise, there would be no free will. So, for those who still feel that they are an innocent victim of an evil government, well, just look at the statistics. Just look what unbelievably high percentage of people have consented. At this point, I would say absolutely willingly and knowingly. And probably that many are already in the waiting lists. And yeah, maybe in the future they will start forcing people and really putting them in difficult situations. But currently, I don't think anybody is really forced. So if that many souls are joining the legions of the devil absolutely willingly, then of course the leaders, the corrupt leaders, have been appointed in such position only as a subsequent result of the low-level consciousness of these people. And now it is becoming absolutely clear that they are a substantial majority. And 2025 may seem to be a little bit far away, looking at the speed with which events develop, but actually it is not. For now, things are under their control. The majority cooperates willingly, I would say even enthusiastically. Probably they're much more cooperative than even the devils expected. Here, the biometric project, which is one of the divisions of hell, I mean, they need some time to digitalize and capture everything. 4 years are not much. Just remember how long has it been since the bug madness started? 1 year, and it feels like a very short time. So 4 years will not feel very long as well. Here, they are forcing people to pre-register to visit for a day, even a provincial park. More and more websites require instant handy number, mobile phone number, confirmation to even use their website. This is an extensive cobweb. And for them, allowing 4 years to knit this entire cobweb is a very realistic estimate, actually. And then they are introducing in the Dajjal more and more all kinds of very innocent looking brothership shamanic ceremonies of all gods combined together for the one. And they're telling us not who is exactly the one. That is kind of mystical. And also in their ecumenical official document, which is enforced from UN, they are openly talking about the man. Again, they are not telling us who is that man. They are talking about and glorifying and devoting their project to him. Also, the tribe who will be like the main source of followers of the man, they are already, I mean, in official documents and official government-sponsored prayers, they're talking about the king, the man, again, without explicitly mentioning, but we know who is exactly their man. And no, I haven't turned suddenly very religious to talk so much about the Dajjal. They're the ones who are turning religious. And few final notes on when to expect what in terms of this timeline, why we are expecting the Great Tribulation to start in a couple of years and the New Age in a couple of decades. Also, why did Prepodobna Dostojna say that in some 150 to 200 years from now the New Age will start? Well, looking at when she lived and when did she say that, probably she said that some 90 years ago. Actually, the time frame she gave fits perfectly with what Seth said, that for all practical purposes you will see the New Age as the magical golden time in some 50 years as from today when I make this video. So why this 40 years gap appears between the judgment, the descent of Christ and the beginning of the New Age? Well, this is what Mother Shipton wrote about this gap, and the same is implied by Slava Sevrukova and Seth, and that these men will come and enlighten the minds of future men and show them how to live and love and thus endow the children with the second sight. Growing graceful, humble, and when they do, the golden age will start anew. So 40 years is a very reasonable time frame to teach all men how to live and love and for one generation to grow. And then the golden age, Satya Yuga in Hindi, will start anew. And some of the helpers of these future men who will be enlightening the men of earth of how to live and love, some of them will be from the Bulgarian tribe, and that's why the Guardians have sent so many prophets over there before it all starts. And this episode's tip on survival food, which will not go bad for even 10 years when it is vacuum packed, candied ginger. And your question about soulmates. The only information I trust about that is in the set books of Jane Roberts. He confirms that such a thing exists. Something like partner souls. Usually they end up being spouses in most of their lives, or sometimes parents, something like this. The soulmate is always the same soul, but no one does not meet it in each and every life according to Seth, just in most of them. Does the concept exist in the Vedas? Yes, we can say so, although I'm not aware of a particular term that is used. But it is explained that very often one has the same spouse life after life. For example, when Parvati was getting married to Shiva, some of the relatives in that particular incarnation about which the story goes, when they saw him, that he is always high on drugs because Shiva is the lord of the intoxicating plants. They even tried to talk Parvati into canceling the marriage on that very same day. But then Brahma, the great-great-grandfather of all souls in our universe, he had to intervene and explain that actually Parvati and Shiva, they're connected forever in each and every incarnation, so there is no way out. And then everybody shut up and they continued with the marriage ceremony. So a plethora of stories like this in the Vedas do imply that the concept exists. And also she asks, why is it so hard for good women to find the right man? Because the right man should be a good man. Good men are scarce these days. And not only for good women, also the bad women have the same problem. That's because the times in which we live are wretched and corrupted. This is not the normal situation. In Vedic times and also in Bogomil times, people really enjoyed their lives. By far, most of the people were very happily married. And that's why the golden age will start anew when people learn how to live and love. Without showering yourself completely in love every day, normal, sensible life is impossible. That is also valid for the most physical bedtime expression of love. People enjoyed wonderful bedtime activities up to 100 years or more because they had knowledge of the natural, of the wild herbs, and they would retain their vitality and good looks until very old age. And from the other point of view, all these things like finding the right spouse, wealth, health, these things are mostly predestined. For sure, that is clear even with basic knowledge of Vedic astrology, because you can see the person's chart, read it yourself, and always see that in 97% of the cases, whatever is in the chart, that's what happens to the person. And exactly at the time when it is supposed to happen. So obviously it is predestined. And the thing is, just the 12 houses and the rules which determine what will be the influence of the planets, they're all set up in such a way that one will have at least one major misery in life. If one is not extremely poor, then probably he will be at least seriously sick or have a terrible spouse nowadays. Or sometimes people have even a set of miseries like this. And it can't be otherwise, because no matter how you position the planets, even if they are more or less good, still they are bound to have some malevolent aspect and cause some sort of serious trouble. The people who really have affluent and pleasant lives nowadays are very, very rare. And in the previous ages, the celestial bodies, they were in different position. We had a couple of moons which were knocked off, so that changed the entire situation with the charts and how they influence the life of the inhabitants of the earth. And that's why now when the new age comes, in many prophecies we see that the planets will go out of their course. They will be no longer as they are now, and the people of Satya Yuga will have again good charts, and that means good lives. And then what is the explanation is the question for straight motherless women. Well, children need love. Uh, when we grow up, we may manage as hermits as well, that is okay. But when we are small, we need the love either of a mother or a grandmother or some relative or somebody who takes care of us. And if that is not there, obviously it's a bad karma. But what exactly are we supposed to gonna learn from that? There is no standard spiritual explanation for everybody. Yes, it does boil ultimately to lack of self-love, not treasuring love enough for everybody. But this is usually so general that for most people it will be of little practical value in terms of solving the problem, to repair the situation, because the excuse which each and every person finds for hating oneself or other people is different. It is based on beliefs, and one has to go into very deep and serious self-introspection to find the entire chain of wrong beliefs and eventually uproot it. And that's how everything will be cured. So, despite the fast spreading contagion of madness, currently we still enjoy more or less peaceful life, at least most of us, and we should do the best use of it. And the best use is to get rid of any addictions. First of all, we should address addiction to substances, alcohol, caffeine, etc. Those who don't have them should address behavior addictions, like, for example, aimlessly browsing internet, and very importantly, mental addictions, like chewing up again and again negative thoughts or thinking in loops. It is normal to think and use our head and heart to analyze a situation, make a choice, take a decision. But the sick part comes that even after we take such a decision, just in a few minutes we start the entire circus again, chewing up on the same worries again and again, even when we don't want to. That's actually a behavioral addiction to worrying. It is a sickness. Just because almost everybody has it doesn't mean it's something normal or healthy. In reality, these periods in between the moments when we really need to think and take decision, those gaps, they should be utilized for us to just float in bliss. That is the normal situation. So first of all, we should realize that this chewing in loops is a sickness, and then we should proceed eliminating exactly as we eliminate all other addictions. And in the previous episode, I recommended some herbs for addictions, but I received complaints that iboga is illegal in too many places, so there are replacements. So this herb is not only fully legal all around the earth, but is also way more affordable than iboga. Its effects are very, very close to that of iboga, and yes, you can use it to get rid of any addiction without an exception. To do that, you have to do a proper ritual the first time before you start taking it. Spend a minimum of 10-15 minutes clearly programming the herb, telling it from what addiction you want to be freed with its help. If you don't know what mantra or what technique to use, maybe you can use the Hindu mantras. In the previous videos I gave 2 mantras for Devi, the benevolent goddess. They are bij mantras, very easy to learn and pronounce. Om Hrim Arham Namaha Kshim Svaha. That's one of them. And then the Bala mantra, which recently came in one of the episodes. Om Aim Klim Sohu, Sohu Klim Aim. And the first mantra again. Om Hrim Arham Namaha Kshim Svaha. And then when you take it every day, you can do a mini ritual, very short, again, clearly telling the herb what exactly it should do. So the way to take Voacanga africana is you can start also with half a pinch of root powder below your tongue, and eventually you swallow that up. But it is best to take it before you will be relaxed and away from technology, because for example on this website there are thousands of experiences of real people with all kinds of deprogramming substances, also called drugs by some people. So while browsing the experiences of various people, it is interesting to notice that many of them note that if they take a given substance and after that they go to the computer and start browsing, it doesn't work as usual. If they were out in nature, it would have worked. It does work. So in few days, if you don't notice that your addiction is evaporating, or if it does evaporate but you want to finish it off faster, you may start very slowly and gradually to increase the dose, very, very gradually. But be careful, because if you don't have experience with sacred or visionary plants, you should not venture in higher doses, because Vokanga africana can have consciousness altering effects, but only in bigger doses. This herb doesn't have consciousness altering effect in smaller doses, and actually is part of many pharmaceutical combinations that you can buy in the pharmacy, usually for heart diseases. The herb, which is similar to iboga, are actually the sananga drops. This I highly recommend to everybody. It is again legal everywhere and is very, very affordable. In many cases, the sananga drops, again with the proper ritual, may not be enough to heal very deep-rooted addictions, but they will always be of help in doing so. And so you can get the mildest option. So you use them once a day, and the only way to do it, at least for me, is to lay down and tightly close my eyes, and then put one drop only in the tear ducts of my eyes while they remain closed at all times. And only then I very gently and very slowly try to open my eyes, because the drops, they burn like chili. So if you open your eyes abruptly, you will be, oh no, really, am I putting chili in my eyes? What am I doing? But it is worth it. Everybody who has used them for a long time says that it is worth the pain. And as you use them for a few days and then a few weeks, it will not burn so much. And yet another herb, which is similar to iboga, and also can do the job which iboga does, is uchusanango, but that is mostly for people who already have experience with working with sacred plants. It is also legal all around the earth. And those who use the kapi vine for addictions, or pretty much anything else, I forgot to mention that the easiest way to extract the good stuff from it is to have it actually powdered. After it is shredded, you just put it in the coffee grinder, and then you can start with even as low as 5 grams of this powder, just brewed as a tea, as normal tea. But then don't throw away the powder. Collect it every day, somewhere drained, so that it dries up. And then 2-3 times per month, you collect all that powder, and then you can do a few more extractions. Let's say the first time you boil it for 10 minutes on the lowest fire possible, and then you do 2 or 3 more extracts, the last time boiling it possibly even for a couple of hours. When you make tea from the powder instead of the shredded vine, first of all, you will need considerably less material of the expensive vine, the wood. And second of all, you will need much less water, because to cover the shredded vine with water, that is much more than covering the powder with water, because the less water you drink with every extraction, the better, because the more water you put, the more diluted will be your experience as well. So all these sacred plants are more effective if they are taken on empty stomach, of course, and most importantly, while you have your period of treatment, you should not take any alcohol at all. Because if you do the usual alcohol drinking together with the sacred plants, no, you will not get poisoned, as some people are trying to scare you. and you will even feel something, some sort of change maybe. However, at the end, when you look back at everything you have done, you will realize that you've been trying desperately to, like as if, fill up a cup with water while there is a hole on the bottom.
Papuzi, done mamino, done le ti daghino, si sciada tecle.